Hello students, welcome to this week's current affairs. We are going to discuss about the topics relevant in geography and internal security and challenges. So the first topic that we have to cover is Colombia has declared recently economic state of emergency. This economic state of emergency was declared after Colombia witnessed one of the most devastating or massive earthquake in the recent years as such. So let us first try to understand that why Colombia experiences earthquake, what is the region behind the Colombia so prone to earthquake, and that to some extent we can understand the region is related to the location of Colombia. Colombia, as you can see, this is part of the circum-Pacific ring of fire. So where Colombia is located, you have two plates. One plate is called as the South American plate, and this other side you will find a plate that is called as Nazca plate. Now Nazca plate is a denser plate, that's why it is heavy and it sinks below the subducts below the South American plate. It is this subduction that results in tectonic stress because plates then converge, rocks get compressed. That compression result in the release of energy in the form of earthquake. Now what makes Colombia more prone is that Colombia is not only experiencing earthquake due to the Pluto plate motion, it also experiences earthquake due to the movement of Caribbean plates. So this lies in the active fault. Active fault means where the plates are continuously moving, where the rocks are continuously getting deformed, compressed, and they break continuously. So active Andean fault is what Colombia is part of. This complex crustal deformation, that is the simple rupture or break in the rock system, can be considered as the region behind the earthquake in Colombia. Colombia also is part of the place or the system that is called as Pacific Ring of Fire. So if you look at this particular map, you can see all around the Pacific Ocean, you will find a ring of volcanoes. These volcanoes are created due to the subduction of one plate below the other. This side, if you look, the Pacific plate is subducting below Eurasian plate. Further south, Pacific plate is subducting below the Australian plate and all. So a lot of intermediate depth earthquake is recorded here. Intermediate depth here means that the general depth of earthquake is between 70 to 300 kilometers as such. And it is this region that has resulted in the formation of the Andes mountain along the western coast of South America. If you look at the map of South America, we know that all along the western coast you have the Andes mountain. So as the Nazca plate subduct below the South American plate, the volcanic lava that erupts, it has solidified, cooled, and has kept on accumulating, forming this longest mountain range in the world. And fault stress transfer is something that also we witness here. Now, human vulnerability in the Colombia was witnessed across many of its popular towns and cities, larger towns and cities such as Cali, Bogota, Medellin, Pereira, and Manizales as such. Now, the question that comes into mind that, okay, Colombia is located along the Pacific Ring of Fire. Now, why Pacific Ring of Fire, or what kind of structure is Pacific Ring of Fire? So, it is also called as Circum-Pacific Belt. Why Ring of Fire? Because it is associated with volcanism. And if it is associated with volcanism, volcanism is associated with fire. And because of the ring-like shape that you have on the periphery of the Pacific Ocean, that is the name. Overall, shape-wise, it is more horseshoe shape. If you look at this diagram I have drawn, you can see clearly the shape is horseshoe shape. So this is the kind of belt you have spread across 40,000 kilometers from the east to west Pacific. And very interestingly, over 90% of global earthquake takes place in this area, and also this belt alone consists of 75% of active volcanoes as such. So question comes that why so many active volcanoes you would find in the Pacific Ring of Fire? Again, we have to understand this with the help of plate interaction. So what we witness here is plate convergence. Example, Pacific plate converging below North American plate, Pacific plate converging below Eurasian plate, Pacific plate is converging below, for example, we can talk about Australian plate. Pacific plate is then converging below the Filipino plate or Philippines Sea plate. And in the east, if you look, we have just seen we have Nazca plate. Nazca plate subduct below the South American plate. You can see a large number of plate subduction. These are just the major ones we are talking about. So large number of plate subduction is recorded here. This causes the break in the rock system, and as the rock undergo compression, the stress keeps on building, and finally when rocks cannot handle this stress, they releases the energy in the form of wave. This wave, when it reaches the surface, is what we see in the form of earthquake. To some extent, this earthquake can also be associated with the generation of magma resulting in the volcanism. That is the reason why countries such as Colombia and other countries like Chile, Peru are so prone to earthquake. The second topic we have to discuss is the glacier changes which we are witnessing across the world. Especially the recent study has proved that thinning of glaciers is being recorded across the Himalayan region. And this is very important development because Himalaya is considered as the third pole of the world. Nowhere else you'd find such a huge volume of glaciers outside of the pole. Only Arctic and Antarctic holds more glaciers compared to Himalayas. So what are the key changes that scientists have witnessed? So first of all, the rate at which glaciers move generally, it has slowed down over the decade. If you talk about the rate exactly, so 2.4 meter per year per decade, that is the rate of slowdown. That means every decade glacier is now moving at a rate of less than 2.4 meter per year, or reduced by 2.4 meter per year. And to some extent, this is associated with the process referred as glacier thinning or ice thinning. When you talk about glacier, you know that it is a humongous amount of snow, humongous volume of ice that generally is located in the mountainous areas or the polar areas, and they are not stationary, they keep moving. So this volume of glaciers helps in its movement, because we've seen the thicker the glacier, faster it moves. But what we witnessed due to global warming is that the ice is thinning, and this rate of thinning, if you look at the data between 2000 to 2005, was about 0.22 meters per year. That means almost we can say that 220 centimeters every year glaciers thin by. Between 2015 to 2020, you can see the rate has significantly increased. It has now been thinning at the rate of 0.57 meter per year. That means not only glaciers are thinning today, they are thinning at what we can call as the accelerated rate. That means much more faster rate. And this is directly an after effect of global warming. We know that due to the anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide, methane, etc., the global atmospheric temperature has increased. As global atmospheric temperature has increased, that means more and more heat is now entrapped inside the troposphere, inside the atmosphere. Because of this region, the areas where temperature was sub-zero, below freezing point, there also we are witnessing increase in temperature. And because of this increase in temperature, the ice mass of the glacier is being lost. So that is how we can explain the thinning and the accelerated thinning. Now, when thinning happens, the question is that why are glaciers also slowing? Because the movement rate has slowed. So reason is simple: warming, global warming results in the loss of masses. The thin glacier, if you think here, this was the original glacier. Now, because of global warming, glacier has transformed something like this. So lower the mass, lesser force would be experienced by the lower end or the lower portion of this ice. And thinner ice, we can say, then creates a lower driving stress. That's why the rate at which ice flows in glacier has also reduced. Now, if ice flow rate is reduced, it means less and less ice is being transported in the area where temperature should be above 0 degrees Celsius. That means now less water would be available, if talk about in longer period of time, to the rivers which trace their origin from the glacier itself, etc. Now, geometry, debris cover, and turbulence conditions also to some extent are responsible for this particular process. Now, question is that how it is going to impact the water security. So, first of all, like you talk about India, majority of the Himalayan rivers, whether it is Ganga river, Yamuna river, Indus, Brahmaputra, most of them originate from the glaciers, and it is the melting of glacier that happens at a rapid pace, provides water to the river during the summer condition, and this is believed to be the peak water phenomena. Now imagine, because glaciers are melting at a rapid rate, temporarily we will see increase in the runoff, because more and more ice sheets will be melting. That's what we describe as thinning as such. So for temporary period of time, you will see a humongous volume of water being carried by the river, and it is believed that by year 2028, the volume of water flowing in the river systems of India specifically, they will reach a peak water volume, the highest level of water volume that has ever been recorded as such. But overall a period of time, if you go to further 2050 or 2075, 2100, that is the end of century, we will see that because the source itself has declined, that means less and less melting would happen. If less and less melting happen, that means over a long time the melt water would decline. That means it will also reduce the volume of water that is flowing in the Himalayan rivers. That would further cause water crisis, not only from the consumption perspective, but also from agriculture perspective, as majority of rivers here supply water that is used in the plains of India to support bumper crop harvest. So it is definitely we can say long-term risks are there. Water security is at risk. Agriculture, because dependency on irrigation water will be at risk. Not only that, in the Himalayan region, for example, Tehri Dam, you can take hydroelectricity, hydropower is generated. If you have less volume of water in the river, obviously the force or the velocity would be lesser. That means the hydropower generation would also suffer. The entire downstream ecosystems that you have, the aquatic habitat that the river carry or support along with themselves, because the water would decline, those ecosystem would also be threatened as such. And not only that, there is a risk that in the higher altitude of Himalayas, in the states such as Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu Kashmir and Sikkim, glacial lake outburst flow risk would also increase as such. What actually happens is many times the melt water of glacier gets accumulated, and the this lake, or basically we can say the melt water, is bound by the loose debris of the glaciers. So if the rapid melting happens, the water volume suddenly will increase in short period of time, and this entire lake can collapse, causing flash flood-like situation. This is also the type of natural disaster you might see increasing in the intensity in coming decades in the Himalayan region. Jaskar Valley was the area of study here. So Ladakh Union Territory, that is where Jaskar Valley is located. You can see a lot of rivers are flowing, originating out of it. It is also referred as high altitude semi-desert because it is located in the Ladakh region, which is on the trans side of Himalayas, northern flank of Great Himalayas, we can say, and spread across a distance or area of 5,000 square kilometers. So basically, it is like this. This is the Great Himalayas, and this side you have Ladakh. So when the monsoon winds enter this area, they rise along the slope of Himalayas, causing rainfall here. But on the other hand, they descend. So when they descend, they do not cause any rainfall. That's why Ladakh is example of rain shadow region. It is colder because of high altitude and drier because of rain shadow effect as such. Penjila is important pass, gateway, Suru Valley and Kargil, Chadar Trek. It is very well known trek. Most of the people who are fond of trekking, they try once this particular trek. So Jaskar river actually originates from Jaskar range, and in the winter this river becomes completely frozen. So you can easily actually walk across the river. Drangadrung glacier is very important, major glaciers of this area, and this region is known for hosting both Ladakh as well as Tibetan cultures. That is the second topic. Third topic we are discuss about is Operation Safed Sagar. A movie also was recently Netflix series actually by the name of same, Operation Safed Sagar, recently was telecasted. So what is Operation Safed Sagar? Now we know that in 1999, if you look at this map, Pakistani military in the disguise of mujahids, they infiltrated across line of actual control. So line of control, LOC it is called as. So line of control, it basically separates Pak occupied Kashmir from the Indian side of Jammu and Kashmir. And the plan of these Pakistani infiltrators and soldiers was to capture all the high elevation peaks in the area, so they can have a commanding position along the entire POK, which they can use to force India to come to the negotiation table for the issue of Kashmir. So strategic heights along the LOC was occupied by these infiltrators, largely in the Kargil region. Indian Air Force has to provide support to Indian Army because Indian Army was at disadvantageous position. Why? Simply because Indian Army is moving from this particular low elevation areas. Their task is to go at this commanding height and capture this post, which already was captured by Pakistani soldiers. Now, Pakistani soldiers and military can easily see and look at the movement of Indian Army and can easily make them target as such. So, because of these problems or issues, the major air operation, first major operation since 1971 war, was conducted or carried out by the brave hearts of Indian Air Forces. There we have seen involvement of several aircraft, fighter aircraft such as MiG-21, MiG-23, MiG-27, and in the later stages of war, even Mirage 2000 that India had imported, procured from France, made its headway into the war as such. Now, the key personnels and operations of this Safed Sagar, if you take a look, it was carried out by a squadron of Indian Air Force led by Wing Commander B.S. Dhanova. The squadron is popularly referred as number 17 Golden Arrows Squadron. Here also the squadron leader Ajay Ahuja of this particular Golden Arrows Squadron, he lost his life when he crashed into the Pakistani side of the Kashmir, Pakistani occupied Kashmir areas, where he was captured by the Pakistani soldiers, and he was given Veer Chakra. He was awarded Veer Chakra, posthumous Veer Chakra. Similarly, Flight Lieutenant K. Nachiketa, he was also captured due to he ejecting from the aircraft as such. He was captured later on under the international and pressure from India. He was repatriated back after severe torture from Pakistani side. Mirage 2000 entered the latest stages of the war, and that changed the overall, we can say, the balance of power in the Kargil war, as it was able to execute precision strikes along the higher elevation of the hills which Pakistani had control over. So laser guided bombs, the most important point we have to keep in mind, that Mirage 2000 was a game changer because it was able to drop laser guided bomb without coming in the area where it can be targeted by the Pakistani manpads or even by Pakistani air force as such. Pakistani positions were targeted. Tiger Hill, which was the most important, and in the last phase of war, Indian Army captured it, was also targeted here. Supply lines of Pakistani Army were targeted, and that caused severe and significant losses to the Pakistanis, and this helped in the overall recapture of strategic height. However, also one reason why this Indian Air Force operation is well known for is because of the unique GPS problem that Indian Air Force ran across. GPS system was designed on the basis of WGS 84, that is Geodetic System 84, World Geodetic System 1984 it is called as. Indian maps, on the other hand, which Indian Air Force had access to, was based on the Everest spheroidal map. This was the map that Survey of India used to delineate the entire contour of the Himalayan region. What actually was experienced is that the map that was used by the GPS, or the coordinate system used by GPS WGS84, and Everest spheroid maps used by Survey of India, both had a positional error, both had a certain discrepancies. This discrepancy or shift is called as datum shift. This datum shift resulted in the positional error of several hundred meters. These errors could reach hundred of meters, as we have discussed. And because of this, if you are bombarding the higher peaks, you might not be able to target the bombs at the exact place where the Pakistani military bases or Pakistani positions are. And that's why Indian Air Force had to practice a lot so that they can pinpoint the exact target where the Air Force Pakistani bases are there. And then the use of handheld GPS should be highlighted here, because this positional error that has crept in, the datum shift that has crept in, it has to be manually corrected, and that was done by using the handheld GPS. Now, how did pilots navigate in the strikes? So, targets, Survey of India map to the scale of 1:50,000 was used here. The Indian Air Force fighters and the navigators has to manually mark the target, and also they had to manually measure the latitude, longitude along which the Pakistani positions could be clearly established. Not only that, when you're marking the contour, that is the height or elevation in the mountain area, it is called as contour line. That has to be manually determined as well. And so that to ensure that the MiG aircraft, which in the earlier stage Indian Air Force was using, does not come in the target range of the Pakistani missiles, they had to bomb this entire bases or entire military positions at the height of 4 kilometers and above. At such, that was such a complex and complicated task, still executed by professionally by the Indian Air Forces. Intelligence and operation challenges also was faced here, because till Kargil war, 1999 war, there was no dedicated high altitude CAS doctrine. That means air support. CAS stands for close air support. That means when Indian Army is trying to take and recapture the positions on the ground, they can be helped a great deal if air support is provided to them, either by providing them with the provisions and also evacuating them in case of casualty, and at the same time helping them by bombarding and destroying the military bases as well as the supply line of Pakistani Air Forces. So LSA also making the task more complicated was the direct order from the Prime Minister's office that you are not allowed to cross the line of control. Every action that Indian Air Force has to take, it has to by being on the other side of the line of control. They could not go in the Pakistani occupied Kashmir. At the same time, the attack profiles was also kind of circuitous in nature, that further complicated task. And Pakistani radar mapping was done by using electronic intelligence as such. But the biggest threat that MiGs faced in the later stage of war is that they were not in the target range of the Pakistani missile systems, but they were targeted by the Stinger man portable air defense system that these Pakistani soldiers were carrying at the time. So anyway, after the end of Kargil war, we learned lessons. We tried to understand that where our weaknesses lied, and that is the reason why Kargil Review Committee was created or formulated to bring intelligence reform or to suggest reforms in the intelligence area under the leadership of K. Subramaniam. So need for integrated theatre command was felt for the first time. And that is the reason why in 2020, after so long years, the Chief of Defense Staff, a post was created that would act as a bridge between the three wings of the military, which is Air Force, Army and Navy as such. At the same time, missile warning system and directional infrared warning system was developed here. Civil, military and tri-services coordination also improved to a great deal and extent by learning the lessons from Kargil war as such. So that is how we can understand the significance Operation Safed Sagar played as far as this particular war is concerned. The next topic is related to national security guidelines for renewable projects. Now, recently, Government of India has come up with a guideline that was given for any renewable energy projects that has to be installed within the border areas or along the border areas. Now, what is the national guideline? So, first guideline is India has a very long land border spanning across almost, we can say, 15,000 kilometers all the way from west, north to east as such. These border passes across 8 countries all the way from Pakistan, Afghanistan, China, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, etc. So now the government of India has stated that any renewable energy projects within 1 kilometer of the international border would be completely prohibited. You cannot install any such project as such. You cannot develop any such project as such. If the project is between 1 to 50 kilometers along the border, you cannot initiate the project without taking clearance from the Ministry of Home Affairs. Why Ministry of Home Affairs? Because MHA is the responsible agency, responsible ministries for the land border security overall, we can say, not only land border, coastal border also. If a project is within 1 to 20 kilometer, apart from NHA clearance, project also has to receive clearance from the Ministry of Defense. They need a kind of no objection certificate as such. Now the question is, with all such projects would be given clearances and NOC? It will depend on the case by case assessment. So both of the ministries, they will go through the case by case, what kind of benefit we are going to get, what kind of project it is, and based on that approval will be given or rejection can also be granted. Ministry of Home Affairs has given a target of 60 days within which decision has to be taken about the future or the prospects of the project. Now, how approval and what is the extent of foreign participation that is permitted here? So now the project, for example, any renewable energy projects, it cannot be directly, approval cannot be directly sent for the MHA or Ministry of Defense. It has to be routed by the MNRE, that is Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. State will have to take in principle land allotment. State will have to provide in principle land allotment. Latitude plus longitude across which the entire project area would be has to be clearly demarcated. Border country personals, they have to take prior permission from them, and there will be no foreign land transfer without the central approval in such projects as such. Security safeguard has also been instituted. That means every renewable energy projects, even when they are given approval, even when they receive clearances, they have to ensure a comprehensive security for its infrastructure, such as they would bring anti-drone system. CISF and state police can carry out joint operation for this particular system. As you know, that CISF is a security force largely mandated with providing security to the industries or mines as well as the critical infrastructure along the border areas. Now, it is the developer who will bear the entire decision has to be taken about the future or the prospects of the project. Now, how approval and what is the extent of foreign participation that is permitted here? So now the project, for example, any renewable energy projects, it cannot be directly, approval cannot be directly sent for the MHA or Ministry of Defense. It has to be routed by the MNRE, that is Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. State will have to take in principle land allotment. State will have to provide in principle land allotment. Latitude plus longitude across which the entire project area would be has to be clearly demarcated. Border country personals, they have to take prior permission from them, and there will be no foreign land transfer without the central approval in such projects as such. Security safeguard has also been instituted. That means every renewable energy projects, even when they are given approval, even when they receive clearances, they have to ensure a comprehensive security for its infrastructure, such as they would bring anti-drone system. CISF and state police can carry out joint operation for this particular system. As you know, that CISF is a security force largely mandated with providing security to the industries or mines as well as the critical infrastructure along the border areas. Now, it is the developer who will bear the entire cost of security. Keep in mind, even though CISF would be providing security to the industries, even though CISF would be operating anti-drone system, and as you know that CISF is central government force, central agencies, but the cost of its operation would not be borne by the government. It would be borne by the developer. That means whoever is responsible for the operation and management and development of the renewable energy project as such. Any participation of foreign nationals, either as an employee, either as an executive officer, or short-term, long-term contract, will have to be properly monitored. FDI, foreign direct investment, it will be based on the applicable rules itself. Now, what about the infrastructure design control? So, based on the guidelines, the infrastructure or the project has to avoid long stretches parallel to the border. For example, when talk about the Rajasthan border like this, you cannot or you should not develop a project or start a project that will be longitudinally parallel to the border. Also, in the project, it has to be ensured that the roads where the project is using, it has to be developed in such a way that it can be used by the security forces in the emergency and for the defense purposes. No residential facilities or hotels will be permitted to be constructed within 5 kilometers from the border. Crowd generating establishments such as restaurants, for example, canteens you can have, or any shopping center we can take, for example, such establishment would not be allowed. It has to be discouraged. Reason of this is very simple, because in the case of war, in the event of war, Pakistani military, Chinese military also, if you talk about the other border, they can target these high population density areas causing high casualty. So the purpose of such guidelines to minimize casualty in the event of war or in the case of any excursion, military aggression or military this adventurism. Height limit for buildings has been kept in the range of 3 meter, 5 meter, 50 meter, depending on how far are they from the international border. Now, the strategic significance of such guidelines, obviously it comes from the fact that the focus of Ministry of Home Affairs as well as Ministry of Defense is to protect the sensitive border zones from the Pakistani or Chinese attack in the future. It strengthens surveillance along the border. If a lot of infrastructure is there along the border, surveillance can become quite tricky. Preserve military mobility. That's why the roads have to be properly cleared and there should not be any kind of obstruction. Renewable infrastructure has to be secured. For example, in the case of Operation Sindoor, when we have seen that Pakistani retaliated by sending a swarms of drone, so such kind of infrastructure will be easily targeted if it is along the border areas. That's why the countermeasures such as anti-drone system CISF has to deploy there and secure as well as expansion as well as infrastructure related to renewable energy. The next topic is related to total solar eclipse 2026. Now we know that solar eclipse refer to a situation when you have sun and then you have the earth and moons comes in between sun and earth, so that the shadow of moon falls on the earth. There you have the pitch darkness. That means if you look at the sun during the solar eclipse, you will see a kind of complete darkness, complete dark disk, because the moon is overshadowing the sun. So this is called as total solar eclipse. That means we can say for solar eclipse to take place, sun, moon and earth should be aligned. Moon should be between sun and earth. Solar light has to be blacked by moon and lunar shadow falls on the earth. This is generally seen in the time of new moon, because if moon is here and if you're looking at the moon from the earth, because this part of moon which is toward the earth, it is not experiencing any kind of light, because we know that moon does not have light of its own. It is getting light from the sun which it reflects back. That's why it's visible. So during the new moon, when we cannot see moon in the sky, the probability of solar eclipse is observed. Now, solar eclipses are of multiple types. One is total solar eclipse. As you can see from this particular picture, when the sun is entirely covered, and when the total solar eclipse occurs, sun gets completely covered and the outermost thin atmosphere of the sun, referred as corona, as a disk, is visible. So this light that you see from here, this is the light coming from the corona layer. Other is annular. Annular solar eclipse is shown here, where the moon is far away from the earth, and that's why though it is completely covering the sun, a small thinner part of the outer sun, outer atmosphere of the sun, outer margin of the sun, more specifically we can say photosphere of sun, is visible to you in the form of a ring. That's why this photospheric part is called as ring of fire. Partial solar eclipse is when moon covers just a part of the sun. Hybrid solar eclipse occur when in different places of earth two different types of solar eclipses is observed. Total eclipse is also observed in certain places, and also annular eclipse is observed in certain places. Partial is the most common solar eclipse out of all the four types that we have studied here. Now let us look at the total solar eclipse. Total solar eclipse is when moon completely covers the sun, and there is a this term that is called as umbra. So if you look at the moon here, if you look at the moon, so example, this is the moon, and when the sunlight is falling on the moon, this side you have a small area of pitch dark shadow, and this is falling on the earth. So this area of the darkest shadow is what we call as umbra. Similarly, moon also creates a lighter shadow which is covering a larger area on the earth's surface. So this is what we call as penumbra. So when you talk about the total solar eclipse, where would it be visible from on the earth? The answer would be the region where umbra of the moon is falling on the earth. It causes complete pitch temporary darkness. Solar corona, as we have discussed, corona is also mysterious layer, temperature is more than 1 million degrees Celsius, is visible. That also raises a lot of interest among the astronomers to understand corona when the total solar eclipse occurs. So it is a kind of narrow path of totality, we can say. Annular eclipses occur when moon appears as smaller because it is farther. We know that moon keeps on moving between perigee and apogee of the sun. Apogee of the earth. Perigee is the nearest distance of moon between the earth. Apogee is the farthest distance of the moon from the earth. Annular eclipses causes ring of fire. Partial, sun is partly covered. Partial also, because you can see that sun is partially covered by the moon. So because sun is partially covered by the moon, we can say the sun would resemble a kind of crescent shape. So that is the point here. Penumbra region we have discussed. Hybrid eclipses, it is because of the movement of moon. Moon also is revolving around the earth. That's why if you look here, a small area is under umbra. A small area here is under umbra. Here also we have umbra. And if it goes away, only penumbra would be seen. That's why total plus annular phases can be seen at the same time. Location dependent. You talk about from this place perspective, when moon is here, it is far away from this place, and that's why the eclipse would turn kind of annular in nature. And if the moon is here, in that case, it is very close to this place, so you'll see total solar eclipse. So it is based on the geometrical changes that happens due to the migration of lunar shadow on the Earth's surface as such, and that changes due to the path of the moon's orbit around the Earth. Now, how often do eclipses occur? So it is believed that solar eclipses can take place 2 to 5 times annually. But one thing to keep in mind is that every new moon would not guarantee eclipse. Why? It is because moon's orbit is tilted at 5 degrees from the Earth's orbital plane. That's why when moon is too high, you cannot perfectly block, moon cannot perfectly block the sun as such. Similarly, if moon is too low, it cannot again block perfectly the sun. So moon has to be exactly aligned. That is called as the nodal areas, nodal line. Moon has to be exactly aligned so that it is able to block the path of sun's rays, and then it will completely cover the sun. So that's why most of time the shadows miss the Earth. That's why every new moon, full moon do not have eclipses. The alignment of nodes should be present there. Now, what are the nodes and line of nodes? So two orbital intersection point, they are called as nodes. What is nodes? Where you have intersection between the orbital plane of moon and orbital plane of Earth. That's why all three bodies, which bodies? Earth, moon, sun, they are not only in the same line, they are also in the same plane. So both conditions have to be satisfied, then only intersection is possible. Moon crosses orbital plane, and new moon plus node would result into eclipse like situations. Lines of nodes has to converge. These are some topics we have to study in this particular week. Now, if you look at some of the questions from the topics we have discussed, with reference to national security guideline for renewable energy projects near India's border, what is the correct option? Renewable energy projects are prohibited within 1 kilometer of international border. It is correct. Projects between 1 kilometer and 20 kilometer require NOC from the Ministry of Defense. That is correct. Projects between 20 to 50 kilometers are exempt from security clearances. This is not correct. You have to take the approval from Ministry to Home Affairs for any project that is located up to 50 kilometers from the border areas. So correct option would be A, 1 and 2 only. With reference to Colombia's seismic activity, consider the following statements. Subduction of Nazca Plate beneath the South American plate contribute to seismic activity. Exactly correct. Colombia is part of Pacific Ring of Fire. We have discussed. Yes, okay, 40,000 km long Pacific Ring of Fire you would find here. The Andes have no relationship with Colombia's tectonic activity. That is incorrect because Andes mountain you would find along the South America. So correct option would be B again, 1 and 2 only. Then with reference to Operation Safed Sagar, consider the following statement. It was Indian Air Force component of the Kargil war, right? Mirage 2000 aircraft was used for precision strikes using laser guided munition. That is correct. They joined in the later or end stages of war, but played a stellar role by destroying the Pakistani bases and aircraft and the supply chain. Indian aircraft are permitted to cross the line of control? No, they were not permitted. Prime Minister office clearly gave them direction that you have to execute every act remaining on our side of the border line of control. So again, 1 and 2 can be considered as the right statement. That's all for this particular video. Thank you very much.